Hello YouTube, this is Asatsu 5 and I'm at the Little Rock, Arkansas Historical Museum and I'm at a Shore Defense, the Bowie Knife in America exhibit. I'm talking softly because I don't want to be really obnoxious, but I thought I would share the experience with you. First off, let's start with this knife. This is a very interesting knife. All of these are reproductions, but this is the Bowie number 1. And Bowie number 1 is interesting because it's the first knife that I can think of that actually had Bowie's name on it, or at least Bowie number 1 on it. No one really knows what Bowie number 1 means. Is it the first Bowie knife that James had made for him by James Black? Is it the first Bowie knife to be called a Bowie knife? No one really knows, but as you can see, it's huge, and it has a weird angle at it. The fighting style with Bowie knives in this time period was to hold it primary edge up, clip down, and use the clip as your primary cutting edge, and using the primary edge as your back cut. And the angle, which should help the cut and keep the knife pointed at your adversary. The Arkansas Historical Museum does own this knife. They own the real one. They bought it at auction, and I guess they decided to have a reproduction so no one will make off with it. Second Bowie. This is the Meso Bowie. I don't know a whole lot about it, but basically when it comes to Bowie knives, there's two Bowie knives that people claim to actually belong to Bowie. That's the Meso Bowie and the Moore Bowie. And I don't know a whole lot about this Meso Bowie. I know the collector that has its name Meso, and there's a little blurb about it right here. Just focus on that real quick so people can pause it and watch and read it themselves. Just when you're watching this video, you can pause it and read it. But there's not a whole lot of people in the exhibit right now, so that's why I'm making the video. Now this is the Moore Bowie. This is by far, in my opinion, one of the coolest Bowies. If you don't know, the Moore Bowie is claimed to be the one that Jim Bowie had at the Alamo. The story goes that a private in Santa Anna's Army found the Bowie knife in the Alamo. I think they said that he kicked it out of the file pile when they were burning the bodies. And this knife has several things going for it. First off, let's talk about the gold. The gold has a forward curve on it, and that was to enable someone to catch the blade and either disarm them or tie them up, or just buy you a few seconds to think. And also, if you'll come around here, you'll notice that those serrations on the spine of the blade, some people say that's because it was made from a file, and I don't think that's what it is, because that would have been pounded out. I think those were put there on purpose to actually lock the blade into place when it was being caught. Another feature that this knife has is on the clip, it's kind of cupped. I can't really point to it, but where the clip starts, right after the serrations, is cupped, and that's supposed to be able to flick knives out of people's hands if they don't have a good grip on it. And the last design feature of this knife is the sharpened false edge, and that is to perform the back cut, or nowadays it'll be used to perform the back cut. Back then that was the primary edge, and some people say that the Bowie knife fighters used that as the primary edge, and also so they can use the spine to parry swords and knives. You notice on the Meso Bowie, it has a brass, I guess you'll call it plate, sweated onto the spine. Some people say that's to catch blades. I think it's just to provide a little bit of shock resistance, and personally I think it looks pretty good as well. But that's also a design feature on the Fighting Bowie knives. Alright, this is a statue depicting the sandbar fight. It was a duel between Samuel Wells and Dr. Thomas Mordock, and the duel ended with very little bloodshed between the two. They both fired their shots, they missed, they shook hands, and the duel was over. But what happened, Jim Bowie and Norris Wright were in the area spectating, and they had bad blood. They did not like each other. Norris Wright had 3 people against Jim Bowie. He was shot twice. I think once, like maybe in the thigh, one in the lung area, and he was stabbed with a sword cane. And legend tells that Norris Wright tried to withdraw his sword from Jim Bowie's chest by putting his foot on his chest and pulling. Jim Bowie then reached up and cut him with his knife. Now, the original knife used in the Sandbar fight wasn't what we consider a traditional Bowie knife. It was probably very similar to an old hickory knife that's made by Ontario. It's very interesting because the knife used at the Sandbar fight probably had no impact on what Bowie knives became afterwards. It had no impact on how Bowie knives looked, or what we call Bowie knives. It is said that Bowie knives existed before Jim Bowie, but Jim Bowie made them famous. But the knife that he used at the Sandbar fight didn't dictate what future Bowie knives looked like. Alright, this is a very interesting knife. This is brother David Crockett's knife. It's said that Jim Bowie gave this knife to David, and David then, I guess, before he died at the Alamo, gave it to someone else, and they were able to preserve the knife. This is very cool. I'm a big David Crockett fan. He's cool. He's a brother. As you may know, that him, brother Bowie, and brother William Barrett Travis all died at the Alamo in 1846. So it's really cool that this knife survived. Just kind of pan down. Has a S-guard, cross guard, and a checkered horn handle. And you'll notice throughout the exhibit, when I show you knives, that the holsters don't have, or the sheaths don't have belt loops. People didn't put belt loops on knives back then. They used a sheath system that had a frog that would sit in the belt or in the waistband. Alright, here's a very interesting group of knives. You'll notice that these are very highly armored, I can't say the word, but accessorized. They're very fancy. These knives are what's known as California knives. They were made in California, probably during the gold rush. What's cool about these knives is they're made from material in the area, and the ivory they're using is walrus ivory. The shell that's used in the knives, as you'll see right here, and on the other knife over here, is abalone. The gold was really, the guy that bought the knife with the gold mined that gold, and he had it put into his knife. So I just want to show that off. You also notice that the coffin-shaped handle in this exhibit is pretty popular. There was kind of a plain looking California knife, but most of them were highly decorated. Alright, these knives are made by Samuel Bell. He was a silversmith, and not all Bowie knife makers were full-time Bowie knife makers. Some of them will traded in other trades. He was a silversmith. He had a market for Bowie knives. He had a demand for Bowie knives, so he took his silversmithing ability and incorporated that into the Bowie knives. And it's pretty cool. He can do stuff with silver that other people couldn't do because he was a silversmith. Very elegant looking. Alright, what we have here is some Confederate Bowie knives from the Civil War. What's pretty interesting, you'll find a big trend in Confederate knives that they're really big, they're very long. They're almost swords in the sense of their size and the degolds that they have, and they're just they're swords. They're Bowie knives, but they're swords at the same time. And they use these as a sword during the Civil War. They could very easily oppose a Union soldier who had a saber, and they'll be at a big disadvantage, but they could oppose it and they could possibly win. And although it's very arguable if the Confederates ever used these, well, in this particular one right here, you can tell that something hit it. It has a big chip in it, but the Civil War was definitely a gun battle. It wasn't really fought hand to hand in the sense how we think of it. It was really bad, but these knives definitely gave the Confederates an edge on affordability and carryability when it comes to carrying a sword-like object and being able to use it against a what I would say is a battle armed army. But yeah, that's it. That's the Confederate swords. Thought I wanted to show those to you, show you the big theme in them, and that's it. All right, the knife we have here is actually Teddy Roosevelt's Bowie knife. I kind of think of it as the pimp knife of its time. It has gold, it has silver, it has rubies, or I think that's a ruby, I don't know, I'm not a jeweler, but it's a very fancy knife, and I just wanted to show that to you. Bowie knives, people tend to think of Bowie knives